Okay, guys, today I am going to walk through parts of the notes with you. Some of it I'm going to leave up to you to fill in on your own, and we will, of course, check everything when we are back together. But some of the new stuff I wanted to actually walk you through so you can see what is happening in the notes. So we are going back and referring back to our class AP Stat student class heights data. So I've included the dot plot of everyone's heights and the summary statistics for you. And I'm going to leave number 1 here open for you guys to do because I think you can handle describing a distribution. And also, I hope you can handle describing a distribution now because we had a quiz on it already. So make sure you describe the shape, center, outlier, spread, and include all the details for our class data. I'm going to keep going though, and we're going to talk about James. He's 68 inches tall, and the question is asking what percent of the heights are less than or equal to 60. This should be an 8. And so I'm going to go up to my dot plot, count all the values that are 68 or less, including James's dot. So I have 4 at 68 and 1 down here at 66. So I've got 5 total dots out of the total of 29 students. And I do want to change that to a percentage, which will get me about 17.2. So about 17% of the heights are less than or equal to 68. Then you want to fill in your height and do the same thing. Figure out how many people in our class are either the same height as you or less than your height. So 2B is on you. Now I'm looking at our cumulative reference sheet here, and I'm just tallying how many fall in each interval of heights. So 56 to 60, we didn't have anybody. Same with 61 to 65. 66 to 70, I believe there are 17, followed by 10 and 2 in our 76 to 80 range. Now, relative frequency is just the proportion out of our total here. So some of these first ones are easy. Get 2 0%. Then 66 to 70%, I have 17 out of 29 of us, which is about 58.6%. And you can keep going and fill in our last 2 categories here. You should get 34.5, and our last one should be 6.9%. Now, cumulative relative frequency, think about what the word cumulative means. We're just adding up the total for everything in that category or less than. So my first 2 are still 0. Then I've got 58.6. And now once I get to 71 to 75, I'm adding in that 34.5 with the 58.6. So now I have a total of 93.1%. That means about 93% of our class heights are 75 or less. And then when I add in our last grouping here, we get up to 100%. And what I'm going to do now is take my cumulative relative frequency graph and plot it on my graph down here. So 56 to 60, I'm at 0. So I'm going to draw lines just so I know where I'm at. And we're doing relative frequency. So these are percentages. So 65 to 70, I should have 58.6%. So I'm going to get real close to 60. And again, cumulative relative frequency. So 70 to 75 is that 93.1%. And then my last group will take us up to 100. Okay. So a couple of follow-up things with our graph here. we have, if you are looking for kind of like the slope of our graph, using these intersection points will help you kind of look at that. And when we are really steep, when everything kind of shifts to steep, that means we have a lot of values. So a steep slope means many values on our graph. And now I'm going to look at my next question here. It says Miss Best is 65 inches tall. We are going to estimate and interpret the percentile she is using the graph. And percentile is our kind of our new vocab here. And percentile says how many people fit that value or less. Now, this is pretty easy since there's no one that's the same height as me or less than my height. So we're looking at about 0%. And I would fall in the close to the 0 percentile since no one else matches me. But the error in saying 0% is I forgot to include myself. So what this should actually be is 1, and now that we're including me in the class total, it would be out of 30. And I would be in about the 3rd percentile. So there's 3% of our class who fall in that once I'm included. So I would be in the 3rd percentile. So then when we switch the question and say estimate and interpret the 80th percentile, we're asking at what value or what height are 80% of our students included or their heights are equal to or less than that value. And I'm going to use my graph over here and I'm going to go up to about 80. This would be my 80% and try to figure out where I'd be for the 80th percentile. And I'd probably be about 75 inches would get me everybody who's in the 80th percentile. But I can also use, I know that it's 93 at 75, so I might want to go a little lower and say maybe like 73 and a half would get me 80% of everybody. So here's my definition for percentile. It's just the percent of values that are less than or equal to a given value. So if you go back to that first page and when we were talking about James and the question asked what percent of the heights are less than or equal to James at 68 inches and we got this 17.2, that means James falls in about the 17th percentile. Okay. And then whatever answer you got for your height, let's say you got a proportion of 82. That means you're in the 82nd percentile of our class. And if you were one of these people who measured in at 76 inches, you should have everybody included in your data, so you would be in the 100th percentile. Our last note about cumulative relative frequency, couple of things is when we graph it, we always need to start at 0 and we actually end at 1. Because if I go back up here, what I really want to do is change these values to 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, and 1. So we always start at 0 and end at 1. And these are going to help us with our percentiles. And the other 3 values that will really help us is our first quartile, Q1, is always equal to the 25th percentile. And I'm going to abbreviate to percentile, I guess, just ILE. Our median will always be equal to our 50th percentile. And our third quartile, Q3, always represents our 75th percentile. So those are some key values that we're going to use for estimating percentiles. So make sure you have filled in notes where you had to, so describing the distribution and filling in your height. And then you also have to complete the check your understanding. And we'll go over these again next time I see you in class.